Good morning, and welcome to Buckeye Wars. This is a little kind of a series I've put together. I've got, 80 something. Little snippets, little memories of what it was like for me growing up in El Dorado Hills, California, back in the 70s and the 80s. Now, I've made a handful of these videos talking about the pond that my friends and I used to fish at. And it was kind of down the street around the corner, kind of a little ways, but not too far. And we would grab all our gear and walk on down there, or take our bicycles on down there, and we would fish this little pond. Mostly bluegill, but there was some bass in there. And I got to thinking about that today, and I thought there's a couple of little stories that I'm not sure I told, and I definitely want them documented. Bill had a fly fishing rod, and he was the only one of us that even thought about fly fishing. I believe it was a Fenwick, and he was pretty good at it, and he was kind of showing off, and he took that down to the pond, and it was we spent all day fishing, and he didn't use the fly rod as much. He was using his regular spinning rig, and we were catching bluegill and screwing around, having a great old time. And it got to be about dusk, and it was just about time for us to pick up our stuff and head on home. And he set up this fly rod and started kind of showing off, if you will. And he was casting that, and the bluegill were messing with it, and it was just a fun thing to watch, because that fly would hit the top of the water, and those bass would come up and grab it, or the little bluegill would come up and grab the fly, and it was a kick to watch that. But what makes the story fun was he was casting. And if you know anything about fly fishing, it's not easy. And you got to make a big arc with your cast, and the fly is in the air for quite some time before it hits the water. And this being about dusk, believe it or not, a bat come out of the sky and grabbed that fly while it was in the air before it hit the water. Oh my God. We're like, oh shit. But that was a memory right there. And then another memory, I remember there were cattail, and if you don't know what that is, look it up. Long, grassy bush that was along the water's edge on one side of the pond and into the water a little bit. And it made it so that you couldn't really fish from that spot because these cattails were in the way. But we knew that the fish liked to hang out close to those cattails, that vegetation. It was kind of shelter for them. But it was tough to cast over in that area because we were kids and we really didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we would try to cast in front of those cattails in the water and run past those cattails, because we figured that there was fish hiding up in and amongst those. And somehow or another, I got my hands on a lure that was heavier, so I could cast further. And I remember this lure in particular. It was about, it maybe 2 inches long by about half-inch wide by about a half-inch tall. Had two treble hooks on it, and it had these little folding wings that kind of folded out from the middle of it and folded out to cause it so when you pulled it through the water, it did back and forth and kind of swam. If you were pulling it at the right speed, it would cause quite a commotion. And for a bass, that's yummy. And so I thought, this is liable to work pretty good. Plus, I can cast it pretty far. I'm going to throw it over there by the cattails, because there's probably a big old bass sitting over there, or at least I thought so, and I hoped so. And I made a couple of casts and nothing. But it was sure fun watching this lure come in, because the way it would swim and make such a commotion, just stirring up the water, splash, 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 splash. And I threw it about the maybe the fourth cast, and I decided to slow it down a little bit. So I pulled it and and then let it sit for a minute. And then I pulled it and and then I let it sit for a minute. And up from the depths, like flipping Moby Dick, comes this big old bass, and big for the pond. The pond was just a little bitty pond. But this bass was probably, I don't know, maybe 2 pounds. And for that little bitty pond, that was a monster. And he come completely out of the water, came down on top of that lure. And for a kid, oh my God, it was that was exciting as heck. He slammed that lure, and I caught him and set the hook and brought him to shore. Ooh, baby, that was something else right there. Anyway, there's a couple stories for you. Thank you for joining me, Buckeye.